This week, inside Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store, we take a visit to the Apple II Arcade. Your host, Jacob Pyle.
Thank you very much. Welcome to my Antique Electronics Store. I'm glad you can join us. This question I'm about to ask is mostly for all of you adults watching. Do you remember when you were a kid and you used to love going to arcades? I do. For those of you newer kids who do not know what an arcade is, it is mostly a building usually filled with all kinds of games to play. If you and your family ever went out to eat at Chuck E. Cheese's, you'll know what I'm talking about. But in the 80s, when the arcades were popular, people would literally cash in their quarters and play every popular arcade game there ever was. Nowadays, arcades are scarce, but you can still find them in many bowling alleys, skating rinks, laundromats, and other places. In fact, in the town I live in, Kokomo, Indiana, we not only have a Chuck E. Cheese, but we also have two local arcades. Kokomo Fun Park, I think the name of it is, over by Indian Heights, and there's also an arcade inside the Markland Mall. Now, also in the 80s, most video game and computer companies wanted to cash in on the arcade success by making home versions of these arcade classics that can be played on any computer or TV anytime they want without having to pay a single quarter per play. What do you think of that? Which leads us into this week's episode. The past 2 weeks, if you missed it, we talked about the Apple II and some of its amazing features, but now, this week, in our concluding look at the Apple II, I'm going to be showcasing to all of you my top 4 arcade games of all time. Keep a close eye on each game, because each game you're about to see has a lot of major differences in graphics, or how the game is presented on the computer, but yet it makes the gameplay more exciting. Coming up after this break, we will begin with an arcade classic that most of you may not be familiar with. We will have that for you after this. Welcome back to the show. Now, before we get into these cool looking arcade games, I would like to issue this disclaimer as I do every week. I am not a commercial spokesperson. I do not endorse any of these electronics that you see on the show. And also, I am discovering these electronics for the first time since the date this program was recorded. These have not been touched or played by me prior to this. Our first game that we're going to look at, like I said, is a game that most of you may not be familiar with yet. But once you get the general idea of the game, you'll find that the game is very fun to play. The game I'm talking about is called Tapper. Now, actually, I remember when I was a kid and I used to play that game on my old Apple IIc, I always thought then and now how awesome the graphics look for its time. And by the way, for each game we feature, I will play at least 5 minutes of each game. So with that being said, here's our first game, Tapper. What you are now looking at is Tapper. This was released by Sega through special arrangement by Bally Midway Company in 1983. When I was looking for this game on eBay, this was the only copy that they had, so this one was pretty rare, and it was kept in mint condition. So how this game works is you are playing the role of a bartender, serving up thirsty customers. The more customers you serve, the more points you'll earn. If you serve the drink to them quick enough, they'll be so back to the entrance of the bar they will leave. However, some of them might stay and have a second glass, and will send empty jugs to the end of the bar. The round is over when you cleared all the customers out of the bar. Oh, one more thing. If you pick up any tips, you will earn bonus points. Now, let's get to the bonus game, but before I describe the bonus game to all of you, notice how beautiful the Mountain Dew logo appears in the screen. So, in the bonus game, you see 6 cans of, in this case, Mountain Dew. The masked figure character seen here is about to shake up 5 of these cans, leaving the other can unshaken. Watch carefully. Now he shovels the cans. And now all you have to do is find the unshaken can. Can you figure out which one of these cans is the unshaken one? I think it's this one. And I was right. Here's a little known fact. When the arcade version originally came out, it was sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, with the Budweiser logo and jingle appearing throughout the game. The original arcade version was intended to be sold to bars, but then in 1984, based on the popularity of the game, it came to arcades under the new name Root Beer Tapper, since the original version was construed as advertising alcohol to minors. So there you have it, our look at Tapper. A pretty nice game, if I do say so myself. When we return, Nintendo comes to the Apple II with a classic arcade game that most of you might be familiar with. But before we get into that, we have this week's trivia question, which is also Nintendo related. Which one of these Nintendo games was actually released for the Apple II? Was it Zelda or Donkey Kong? I'll have the answer for you when we return. Welcome back. I hope you catched this week's trivia question before the break. If you haven't, here it is. Which one of these Nintendo games was actually released for the Apple II? Was it Zelda or Donkey Kong? The answer is Donkey Kong. Now, here's an interesting fact about it. Before Nintendo became famous with the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo, so on and so forth, it actually would make arcade games. And some of them actually were issued for the Apple II. Donkey Kong was one of them, the other one being Mario Brothers, both of which were issued through Atari by special arrangement from Nintendo, and were both released in the early 80s. As a matter of fact, Donkey Kong is number 2 on our look at some really cool Apple II arcade games. So, now without further ado, here's a look at Donkey Kong. This is Donkey Kong. This was released by Atari through special arrangement by Nintendo in 1984. This is Mario. This is Donkey Kong. This is the princess. The princess is basically trapped with Donkey Kong. Mario's job is to climb all the way up to the tower to rescue the princess, avoiding obstacles along the way. Some of the aisles also have a hammer, so for 20 seconds, Mario can be able to hit any barrel with a hammer and score bonus points. If he hits a barrel on any one level, he will lose a life. Now, as the levels progress, the game and the obstacles that Mario has to face will get harder. Overall, this is an exciting game, and a game that everybody in the whole family can play. Coming up after the break, a game that I originally thought was a cool looking drawing program. You'll see it when we come back. Welcome back to Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store. This next game I'm about to show you is called Dig Dug. Now, when I was a kid, I confused myself thinking the game was a drawing program. Basically because of the way the game is set up. And for most of you guys who are familiar with the game, you pretty much know what I'm talking about. But for those who aren't familiar with the game, you guys will know what I'm talking about. So, without further ado, here's Dig Dug. This is Dig Dug. This was released by Atari through special arrangement by Bally Midway Company in 1984. Dig Dug has to go underneath the ground and fight all the enemies to complete a level. Now do you see the reason why I thought this was a drawing game? All Dig Dug has to do is use his air gun to blow up and destroy the enemies. Not the dragon character, this is Flygar. He can blow fire from his mouth at any time, even when Dig Dug tries to destroy him. There are also rocks all around the play area that can also be used to destroy enemies. But be careful. It can also squash Dig Dug if you're not careful. So, as was the case with Tapper, there are 3 ways you can lose a life on this game too. If an enemy touches you, if you touch Frygar's fire, or if you get caught crushed underneath one of the rocks, you will lose a life. Overall, it is a good game, just don't mistake this as a drawing game as I did. When we come back, we will be featuring a very familiar arcade game for most of you. I'm not going to give you its name, but if you want to see what it is, you'll have to wait till after this break to find out. We'll be back. Welcome back. Now, I said before the break that this is a very familiar arcade game, and it is. In fact, to me, no arcade game collection would be complete without it. I'll give you some further clues. It's a game where you can easily rack up lots of points. Well, that's any game. The game is pretty much like a maze. In fact, it is a maze. It includes ghosts, and the character looks like a round pizza with 1 or 2 slices taken out. Okay, I think most of you know what I'm talking about. But this last game we're going to get into this week is called PacMan. This is PacMan. This was released by Atari through special arrangement by Bally Midway Company in 1984. Your goal in PacMan is to eat as many Pac Dots as possible without coming into any contact with any of the ghosts. If you come into contact with a ghost at any time, you will lose a life. Now, in the corners of the maze, you'll notice big dots. These are power-ups, giving PacMan the ability to eat ghosts for a short amount of time. As levels progress, that time gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And be careful, because sometimes the ghosts will come into all directions in a way where you will get trapped. The level is over when all the Pac Dots are cleared on any one maze. This was a fun game to play, and I hope all of you out there watching who has not heard of PacMan can enjoy the game too. That was PacMan. This was our top 4 look at arcade games for the Apple II, and in fact, this ends our look at our 3-part look at the Apple II computer. Overall, I really enjoyed bringing this nostalgic piece of machinery for you guys the past few weeks. Most of the software and games and cool looking features brought back a lot of memories for me, as I hoped it did for all of you. I thank you for visiting Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store. I'm Jacob Pyle. Our store is closed. Good night.
If you would like to suggest topics for future episodes, or if you would like a copy of any past episode of this show, send an email to jacobpyle at jtpyle1@aol.com. And on our next visit to Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store, we're going to be presenting Part 1 of a 3-part look at some of these games that Nintendo built. Join us as we present a tribute to Nintendo. That's next time, right here inside Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store. This is Butch McCain speaking for Jacob Pyle's Antique Electronics Store, a Pyle Media Ventures presentation.